availability of the services, right services to the right people at the right time, and service level management, availability management directly focuses on these areas. So what are we looking at this best practice at the end? We are saying that, okay, we have a best practice which basically makes a promise of managing the IT service, and it has defined set of processes with the ownership. It has defined set of, I would say, procedures and guidelines in detail, which will allow organizations to make sure that if they want to govern an IT, they have detailed methodology available. And again, as I said, this being a best practice, it does not again enforce a holistic or a complete approach. You also have a choice of pick and choose. You can start with basic minimum set of processes. You can definitely first focus on where you want to begin and then take a choice as you want to grow further. So we have seen so far a framework which takes a life cycle approach, and we also have seen probably a best practice which also takes a holistic approach. Probably now I'll take you to one of the standards, and I'm sure again a quick poll, ISO 20000. How many of us are familiar? Okay, good number. The fact is ISO 20000, the erstwhile BS 15000. How many of you know BS 15000? Let me just see if there's a difference. What's interesting is that hands which were raised, they were not same. Yeah, so BS 15000 and ISO 20000 are known differently. But of course, as we know that BS 15000 was more focused on the European, whereas ISO 20000 is again the same standard, but at the same time now has much more internationalization done, because the adaptability towards the other part of the world was much more with ease. So what's the key fact of this standard? It's an international standard, and of course recognizes the demand of independent accreditation. And I'm sure all of us here do understand the importance of independent accreditation. Because typically, look, what it brought to the table was combining the strength of ISO 9000 and enhance the strength of ITIL. That was important to understand. And it's complementary to the existing quality management methodologies. Because just about a few days, I met probably two CEOs and CIOs in one of the conference. And they were saying that, Sandeep, how long do you think this is going to continue? And I was actually asking what exactly they were asking me. They said that we have at least X amount of best practices, and we are compliant with 5 different certifications, and we have 3 more which we are doing, and how many more are going to come we do not know. And that's the pain which today every CEO and CIO is facing, because of the simple reason that the existing quality management methodologies, if you cannot complement them with each other, then it becomes much more painful. And right now the industry is moving towards this fact that they are looking for something which is a top domain, little bit a certification or best practice, little bit more holistic or integrated approach. And we are seeing organizations already moving into the fact that now they have integration of ISO 9000, ISO 27000 and ISO 20000, all 3 being done once. That means the type of procedures you will want to define, the type of controls which you will want to define, you will want to define holistically once, and then get audited also probably at one time. And some of our projects which we are doing are the same, and such projects are increasing. That means organizations are looking for definitely somewhere at the top, they are all meeting together. And I wouldn't be surprised that such best practices or standards could give 180 degree opposite guidance. They will always be complementary, but they cannot be really contradictory. So coming back to the ISO 20000, definitely it looks at the PDCA, the continuous improvement mode, but then how is it really different from the best practice? And I would say probably there are only 3 key differences. It definitely mandates the shalls. It's more of a prescriptive than just being prescriptive, and of course it can be audited against. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that one must understand I can be aligned to ITIL, but I cannot be audited against ITIL. If you're looking for a certification, a stamp of approval, an independent accreditation, then definitely, though this is based on the same ITIL best practice, but definitely it is a standard against which you can get that stamp of approval, the independent accreditation. So if you look at such standard and how does it really is configured, and you can very easily see that the entire ITR portion which we saw has been regrouped, but it all exists. That means you can see the release, incident, problem, change, all support processes as well as delivery processes. With only 3 more new processes, which are focusing at business relationship and supplier relationship, and one which is service reporting. So the fact is, this is a standard based on the ITR as a best practice. At the same time, it brought in the ISO 9000 components, the management responsibility, documentation requirements, and competence and awareness. And of course, it brought in the one more section which was looking at planning to implement new and change services. And then, of course, the PDCA. So now we have a standard which looks at the best practices of a quality management system and ITR as a best practice and addresses both. So how is this particular standard maps onto IT governance needs? And it will be surprised if you see that the entire lower portion which we already saw, the mappings are common. That means what we saw in the best practice, the mappings are common. But in terms of strategic alignment, there are two new ones which gets added up, and they will be focusing on the PDCA cycle. By defining quality management methodology, they have ensured that the continuous alignment is driven by the standard, and that also improving the service in a, I would say, very specified manner. Also, you can see the planning and implementing new services. They are ensuring that if the service is changing, if the service is to be aligned with the business, it has to be done in 90% of planning and 10% of execution mode. And that's a very strategic portion. If you look from the perspective of value delivery, we already saw the components. In the risk assessment, one of the things which got added was the management responsibility portion, where now we have made absolute sure that management takes not just demonstrate commitments, but takes a forward step to ensure that it is demonstrating its commitment to its responsibility, and there are assigned responsibilities where oversight, review, setting direction is ensured. From the perspective of resource management, one of the factors which got added is probably the competence, awareness and training, where we saw the human capital aspect, which was not really addressed in the best practice, got addressed here. The kind of requirement for making sure that such best practice-based standard brings organization the value which is required. And lastly, of course, the performance measurement, where we saw one new process, which is service reporting, actually brought in a very good, I would say, contribution, because it's brought into the focus the need for reporting, which is just not a data-oriented or just not information-oriented, but also knowledge and wisdom-oriented. That means it is allowing organization and ensuring organization bring in the intelligence in its reporting. And that's what probably performance measurement drive towards. So, to sum up, probably we saw so far that there is a control framework, and it's mostly at a strategic layer, and it's definitely delivering the value to the organization. In the areas it wants to derive this value from, and we also saw ITR as the best practice, and we saw one standard. So the fact is that IT governance even today, and still one of the biggest challenges of aligning the IT with the business. And I would say it is there for a decade, and I would be really surprised if it goes away after a decade. Because the way the business is changing, right from IT being a provider, automator, enabler, partner, and again a driver, I'm sure there are other things to come still in the pipeline. So this alignment is a continuous process. It will be a dream come true, or as somebody said, it's a utopia that we probably think IT is now automatically aligned. So this is going to remain for quite some time, and we definitely require help, and definitely we have help in terms of either the framework which we saw, or the best practices which we have, or the standards which are available. And depending upon your need, you can choose one of the either a framework or best practice or standard. And these are not the only three. There are plenty of the others. But of course, you must take the cognizance of the fact that there is no one best size fits all. It's impossible for an organization to pick and choose only one standard and say, hey, how can I derive maximum out of this? No. Probably you would definitely want to follow more than one. And also would want to choose based on your right size of the organization and the kind of value drivers which you're defining for yourself. It's also a fact that the key is to first adopt and then adapt. Make it customized for your organization. And fortunately, all these best practices and beyond them, they do allow organizations to adapt. They do allow opportunities of customization. They do allow opportunities of tailoring it to fit you, because they are quite generic in the initial stage, but the key is to adopt them and then make sure that you adapt them internally so that you get what you want to define them for. And probably I would want to say in the end that earlier you start, larger the benefits would be, because somebody has said rightly that even the journey of 1,000 miles still begins with the first step. And I would say that this is the time we must take that journey. Thank you all for being here and not getting up for your tea. And I'm happy that my organization has met its value drivers for being here. Thank you again. I will be happy to take any questions with the organization for me.
Any questions, please? Okay, we'll take them offline. So, thanks so much. An excellent session to understand which framework to choose from. That's one of the key things that comes out from the session. Of course, one of the interesting things that I always find to deliberate upon what is the best practice. Everybody talks about best practices, left, right, and center. And it's whatever is good for the business is best for you. So, taking that forward, one caution though, while you may select any framework that you wish to choose, the time has come to decide in IT governance, stop doing things which are unnecessary. We've been doing things we're trying to do all the things in IT. Stop doing things which are unnecessary in IT. Stop gathering that information which has probably become unnecessary over the years. This is one of the new factor which is coming into play. I now request VP Leeladhar, President, Hyderabad chapter, to do the honors. Thank you. While applauding for these sessions, please remember Swami Ramdev. This is a yoga for you also. It will probably keep you healthy too if you applaud well. Thank you. And just to remind you, before we leave for tea, we have 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes for tea break. The sooner we come, the better. And just for the people who walked in a little late, two interesting sections. One, a referral draw by SPG. Winner will be declared after the round table based on the card drops at SPG. Second one is the feedback forms to be filled up by everybody before the lunch session. If you can collect them, we'll have them on your tables if you don't have them already now. And based on that, there's another gift for a Nokia mobile phone from the ISACA New Delhi chapter for the winner, which will also be declared after the round table. And from STG, they are offering an iPod Shuffle, so that's also an interesting gift for you. Thank you. Please join us in the tea. Over to Rafiq.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's better. I'm delighted to be here. I remember I was in CISAC 1999 when we had the first such type of conference in Bombay. And Avinash Karal took a major role in actually organizing this conference. I'm happy once again to come to Delhi this time to speak at this conference. The conference in 1999 was a trendsetter because I remember when we started the chapter in India, Bangalore, in 1995 we had about 20 members. With 20 members we started. In 1990, if you count probably there were 200 CISAs. And now if you look at 2008, I think we have more than 2,000 CISAs in India. And India is the fastest growing region as far as CISA and the ISACA members is concerned. And if you look at the usage of ISACA's publications and products in India, it has been growing quite extensively. So I'm quite happy to be here.
to share my perspective of e-governance the COBIT way. I started using COBIT in 1996 when I was doing IS audit. In 1992, I decided to specialize in information systems audit. So for nearly 3 to 4 years, struggling the trial and error way, trying to use different frameworks and standards for doing information systems audit. And in 1996, I came across the first version of COBIT, and that got attracted me, and I've been using it in the last 12 years, quite extensively for various types of assignments. So when I got this topic of e-governance the COBIT way, so one of the first things which struck me was what's the relationship between, if you take the relationship between this greeting and there's another greeting in Islam, which we always say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be on you. So we are all here for peaceful purpose, and if we accomplish the purpose, I think the purpose is served. Now, what is the relationship between that and IT governance? I think we'll establish it quite quickly. Quite often, if you see, look at IT implementation or IT governance implementation. We always believe if any best practice, make it modern as per our requirements. So it's important to remember what is the principle or what is the concept behind this model, then use it accordingly. Quite often, if you look at using any best practices, especially IT governance, you need to understand the concept. There is a philosophy, there is a principle behind it. And if you can understand the principle, the philosophy, then I think you can use it much more efficiently. And that's why it's important that you get the right connection. Now this is what can happen if you don't get the right connection. Then you can actually start to blame him and talk about various things, but it will not really help. When you talk about IT governance or using any best practices, quite often there could be a problem of communication. And especially if your consultants who are trying to implement IT governance, I think there is an issue here. Let's see how best we can resolve it. Now this is what can happen. You can get the best frameworks, you can get the best things, but things will not work out in the way it is actually planned. If there is a lack of communication, if the objective and the purpose is not really understood. I hope you've got enough insight. Now let's get back to the presentation. Okay, we talked about e-governance the COBIT way. Broadly, I thought we should look at four areas which I thought we should cover. One is we'll have a look at an overview of e-governance in India and abroad. How many of you are from government? Okay, for those of you who are not from the government, I think we will learn the COBIT way. Now, the focus of this presentation is how you can use COBIT from the perspective of e-governance, and one important factor, if you look at any best practices framework, is you will know the methodology that you can actually apply to any situation. So if you can apply COBIT for e-governance, then you can apply COBIT for improving your performance or improving the processes. You can use it for any purpose for that matter. So we'll have a quick look at overview of IT governance in COBIT. So I'll actually build on what Sandeep has done and take it forward from there. We'll look at how COBIT has been used for e-governance, and look at some case studies which are featured on the ISACA website, how government organizations have used COBIT. Now let's quickly look at what is overview of e-governance. The first thing is to get the definitions of the fundamentals right. So traditionally, they say, look at governance, they say governance refers to modes of managing public institutions in terms of effectiveness and legitimacy, and the essence of which may be judged by legitimacy, basis of participation, rule of law, transparency, and accountability. These are the fundamental factors or drivers of implementing governance. Now, if you take this further and implement this concept in e-governance, they say e-governance is the application of information and communication technology to transform the efficiency, effectiveness, transparency, and the accountability of informational and transactional exchanges within government, between government and government agencies of national, state, municipal, and local levels, citizens and business, and to empower citizens to access and use of information. So fundamentally, e-governance is about usage of information technology by government for providing better services to its citizens. If you look at another definition, it says use of modern information and communication technologies such as the internet, land, mobile, etc. by governments to improve effectiveness, efficiency, service delivery, and to promote democracy. So definitely it does help in promoting democracy. If you want to implement e-governance, what are the phases of e-governance? Now, if you look at one more definition or principle of e-governance, it says conducting any aspect of government business operations over the internet, from providing information by the government to paying bills to the government. This is a broad spectrum of e-governance. What are the phases of governance? Based on Gartner research, they say the first phase would be the providing of information. Which means there is a presence of the government organization telling clearly what is the type of services they provide. It's just an information distribution channel. The second stage is where it becomes interactive. You're not only providing information, but you're also taking inputs from the citizens or the users. And the third stage is we actually complete the cycle. You're not only accepting inputs, you're not only providing information, but you're completing the transaction. And that is the third phase. And the fourth phase, what is called as transformation. And if you look at many of the developed countries, they actually got towards the stage where you can actually complete the transaction, not only complete the transaction, the complete process is actually linked together. So it's quite possible, even India, I think we're coming to the particular stage. Now let's say there's a particular expenditure, there's a particular income which has come in. Earlier, I think there was a hesitancy, should I disclose this income, or okay, even if you don't disclose this income, what will happen? Now there is an apprehension because the income tax officer, when he opens your file, I think all the related items of income or expenditure from different this one is actually reflected back. So he can actually tell you, now you got this particular income on this particular day, or you spent this particular money on this credit card, now can you show me this particular transaction? Now the same thing is actually happening even with VAT also. Quite often people are apprehensive about VAT because they know if they miss out accounting for any transaction, especially bill transactions, then it could be possible the VAT officer, when he opens the account, his account, he can actually see what the transactions which have been actually accounted. So in fact, in Singapore government, you don't need to file income tax return. The government actually sends you a return telling you this is the income, this is the information we have based on the data which has been collected from different sources. We'd like to confirm that or add additional information which is not available with us. So that's what we call as the informational exchange. Now I have a friend in UK, now he's trying to come back to India, and he says when he's just about to go out, clear the immigration officer said, sorry, we have got a notice from the department, from the income tax department, it seems you have to pay this particular amount, or this electricity bill has not been paid, sorry, we cannot allow you to go out of the country. So he had to clear the dues, what dues was there before he could actually go. And that's what we talk about a transformation, where all the information is actually completed and there is a seamless interchange or exchange of information. Why should any organization or government organization go for e-governance? Just like COBIT, they say the common framework becomes easy to implement. Similarly, if you look at e-governance, they say it provides a common framework and direction in the implementation of government policies for the following. Primarily, the objective of government is to govern, to provide direction and control in terms of how citizens are supposed to operate in a particular country, provide the services and see that the revenue is collected to be able to spend it for the purpose of the citizens. So if you look at this common framework, if you have a common framework, this common framework could be implemented across the public sector organizations and institutions, which means it is B2B, or between the government and the business community, or between the government and the business citizens. What is the main objective of e-governance? Primarily, it is to improve the information flow and the services to the citizens. So if you look at the various models of technology development of government organizations across India and the world, you find the technology deployment could be in the form of information kiosks, distance education, internet for schools, rural and remote access, disaster services, public security services. This is just some example of how technology has been deployed for implementing e-governance. 3 months back, I was attending a conference of the Computer Society of India, where one of the track was on e-governance. So I had the opportunity to actually be present in this particular e-governance track. Computer Society of India also has what is called as Nihilant e-governance awards. They actually get proposals from different government organizations in India and evaluate them in terms of effectiveness and efficiency and the impact they have on the society and actually award them. I was under the impression that in India, e-governance is not really taking off because we have not really seen much. But when I saw the presentations from the different organizations who actually got the award, I was really impressed by the type of e-governance implementation which is actually going across in India. I'll also show you some examples of what has happened as the e-governance is concerned. But as it happens in any project, even in e-governance projects, you find there are a number of stakeholders who need to be involved. There are a number of processes which need to be accomplished successfully, effectively, and efficiently. And quite often you find there is a lack of coordination, there is a lack of communication, and there is a lack of execution. And in spite of numerous experts, one of the first things which happens quite often in implementation of e-governance project is the appointment of an expert or consultant. So in spite of having numerous experts and people deployed, you find the success rate is less than 24%. So which means nearly 76% of the e-governance projects do not achieve the objectives for which they are actually implemented, or they go beyond the projected time or the budget. What are the principal causes for failure? What are the key reasons for this failure? Now you find there could be technical areas. Quite often I've seen, even in my experience, the applications being developed do not plan for interoperability, scalability, lack of common standards and frameworks. This where standards like COBIT and IEL and ISO 27001 or any other standard would be useful. Core infrastructure needs to be conceptualized and developed. Quite often it happens that the e-governance in a big way, and then you're actually in the implementation stage, and then you find they're actually working out, okay, where is the infrastructure required for this? Like in Bangalore, we're supposed to have the inauguration of the international airport on March 30th, and still we don't have a way to actually go to the airport. It's about 40 kilometers away, and still they're figuring out what's the best way to reach to the airport, because the earlier airport was within the city, which is about 10 to 12 kilometers, and now it's about 40 kilometers, and now they're trying to work out some shortcuts, build some underpass so that actually go to the airport smoothly. But actually they should have planned for this 3 years back, and the plan was they're supposed to have a direct link and all those things. But many other things did not happen. Why? Because they did not look at it from a long-term perspective. And there are a lot of departments involved, and they did not actually come to a conclusion on this. You also have project management issues. There is a need for a project-oriented approach, following a time-based approach, and the project management processes, even if followed, have not been institutionalized. Now I want to keep things in perspective. Now if you look at COBIT as a model of IT governance, we are talking about IT governance is the responsibility of the senior management. It's supposed to ensure accountability for the stakeholders. It's supposed to ensure that you are able to focus on the 5 focus areas like strategic alignment, like value delivery, risk management, performance management. So these are the broad areas of which you're supposed to look at. Now if you look at from that perspective, you find if the organizations which actually implemented e-governance, if they adopted a common standard or framework like COBIT, many of these areas would have been actually conceived in advance and that would have been avoided. So some of the other reasons is change management of software issues. E-governance perceived as an infringement to turf areas. Many of them hold on to information, and now you find that you need to share this information or processes. Now most of the employees are working on these projects apart from the other responsibilities. Now e-governance has also taken up one more responsibility, and that's where it becomes a problem. And this is a problem even with COBIT implementation also, that there is no dedicated personnel. I've looked at many COBIT implementation projects. One of the reasons for failure of the COBIT implementation is it's given an additional responsibility. And when it's given as additional responsibility, it's generally not really executed well, because the focus is more on the general responsibilities, the usual responsibilities, and these additional responsibilities can always be deferred because somebody is on the other. Implementing e-governance also requires certain change in the way information is actually processed, which requires re-engineering. That's also another reason why many of the projects fail. And there's a need for a common standard applications, a common structured approach in terms of how information has to be shared and processed. There are also financial and managerial issues which COBIT cannot help in terms of actually funding and financial stability of the projects. But COBIT actually can help you in actually if you can do the value delivery. So it means actually decide whether it's really viable to do this particular project, why should you do this particular project. A lack of readily available support which also could be accomplished. Now look at some of the examples of e-governance in India. If you look at these are only some examples. Now you look at the state and union territories, there are a lot of initiatives which are covering automation, user change collection, delivery policy programs. We have AP, which has been quite ahead in terms of implementing e-governance projects. There are quite a lot of projects like e-saver, card, invoice, etc. We have sales tax administration. We have Delhi automatic vehicle tracking system. In Goa, you have the Dharani project. So there are a lot of projects in Karnataka, which is supposed to be a landmark case, which is being used as an example in many cases. The Bhumi project, which actually gives the right of information for every villager to actually go across to the kiosk and actually get any information pertaining to the land records and the land holdings. So like that, we also have a lot of e-governance projects which have been successfully implemented. I also come across how COBIT is actually linked to this and how it is being used. There is an organization called as a Center for Technology in Government. We will come to that a little later. So if you look at the issues when assessing public value, what is most important, how do we estimate the return on public IT investment and e-government initiatives? This remains a core problem for IT planning and decision making. Like we said, government is supposed to be a non-profit organization. Now, can they really look at effectiveness and efficiency? Does it have meaning? Now, when you're not looking at profit, do we need to really look at strategic alignment, value delivery? Do we need to really look at risk management, performance management, etc.? So we look at those areas. Does it really matter? Now, if you look at the range of e-governance projects which have been implemented, they could range from complex infrastructure projects which are there to online dog license. So which means if you've got a dog, you can get an online license for the dog. The returns can be obvious and single dimensional. If, for example, you can actually look at time savings. For example, if I need to apply for a passport, it takes so many hours and days to actually get the passport from filling up the application to getting the particular passport to now doing the same online and being able to get it within a particular amount of time. Now, if I want to pay a particular utility bill to the government, it takes a particular amount of time. Now, with online availability of this particular service, I can actually reduce time to this X amount. So, they can actually compute this in terms of time savings. This is what I said, we cannot really measure it in terms of only money, but it can also be in terms of the time savings. It can also be complex or multidimensional, which means you actually look at better governance, which means you want to provide the services to the citizens in a better way. Now, can there be parameters for that in terms of performance management? Is definitely positive. We'll look at it a little later. There is a lack of systematic attention to how government IT investment generates results of value from the public point of view. So you have a lot of governance projects which are taking place with massive investment, but you really don't know whether they brought in the required amount of results which are supposed to be getting from that particular project. You also have risk associated to government IT investments. These are primarily from the point of technology deployment. What is the type of technology we need to deploy? And the risks that involve public beneficiaries of the investments, quite often they're not really measured. The Center for Technology in Government, to take care of this, has developed the public value framework, which actually covers all these concepts. It looks at investments goals. What are the business processes of the government? Value mechanisms, so what are the value types you need to have? And then based on this particular framework, you can actually do a risk analysis, you can do a measurement, you can look at what is the impact on the stakeholders, you can look at who are the stakeholders, what are the interests of the stakeholders, and you can have a mechanism for reporting and the risk mitigation strategies. Now, if you look at COBIT, if you are able to implement COBIT as a model of IT governance, you find COBIT actually encompasses all this. I'll also give a little later examples how IT companies who are providing e-governance services are actually integrating this in providing these services. So what happens when you use the public framework or any IT governance framework is it comes what happens the government is left with the impact of the stakeholders. And this is what is primarily the objective of IT governance. Establish accountability to the stakeholders. Ensure that the senior management is responsible for ensuring the results are accomplished. If we go further, let's look at the overview of IT governance in COBIT. There are quite a lot of definitions about IT governance. But fundamentally, if you see, they say IT governance is a subset of corporate governance and is focused on IT systems and their performance and risk management. Which means fundamentally, they say IT governance is a subset of corporate governance. If you look at any organizations worth its name, there was a time when information technology was more of a data processing. Then we evolved to a stage where you're talking about a utilitarian service. IT is supposed to be more of a utilitarian service. Now you find if organizations don't leverage or harness the power of information technologies to achieve strategic or competitive advantage, then they're not really using technology quite well. So the focus of IT governance is to ensure that we're able to leverage and harness the power of information technology towards achieving the strategic and competitive advantages. So what does IT governance deal with? It deals with the relationship between the business focus and the IT management in terms of what do we want to accomplish, focus on your key purpose or key mission, and that's why I talked about the purpose, why we are here. So we need to look at the IT management, which is the organization, what are the resources we have, how are we going to use them. Highlight the importance of IT matters in terms of what is the criticality of IT, what is the dependence on IT, in what way we can use IT effectively within the organization to achieve business objectives and purposes, and promote the strategic IT decisions which should be owned by the corporate board rather than by the CIO or IT managers. The key differentiator between IT management and IT governance, in fact, recently I was in Muscat, there was the ISACA conference. One of the members, the audience asked the panel discussion, what is the key difference between IT governance and IT management? And the panelists said, if you look at quality assurance and quality control, they say what is the difference between quality assurance and quality control? They say quality control is, quality assurance is quality control and quality control. Similarly, if you look at IT governance, they say it's IT management of IT management. So do you have a process which actually manages the IT management within the organization? That's what is the key differentiator. The other key differentiator between IT governance and IT management is who is responsible, who is vested with the responsibility of ensuring that you're able to derive value from information technology. Is it relegated to the IT department or is it vested to the senior management? Do senior management hold accountability, drive this information technology within the organization, or they actually relegated to the IT department? The whole thrust of IT governance, if you look at the way information technology governance is growing, I've been a member of the CGI certification board, the new certification which talks about certified in the governance of information technology. Being a member of this particular board, one of the factors we had to determine was, is there a need for this type of certification? Are there organizations or individuals who require IT governance? So there was a quick survey which was done, and it was revealed that IT governance is going to be the key differentiator in deciding whether organizations are going to be successful and how successful they are going to be. And the next question was, okay, in IT governance, is there a body of knowledge which is available universally, and which is competencies and knowledge and skill sets which are available universally now in the domain of IT governance? And therefore, yes, there is a body of IT governance, and not necessarily with COBIT. Initially, one of the idea was that we come out with the COBIT-related certification, and they found it's not necessarily COBIT was one of the key tools which can be used for IT governance, but a lot of other frameworks which can be used for accomplishing IT governance. And that's where they said there is an existing body of knowledge pertaining to IT governance, but as of now, there is a lack of clarity in terms of what IT governance is all about. And that's where they said the certification can actually be the key differentiator and distinguish that this person has the competencies, the knowledge, and the skill sets required to be an IT governance professional. What are the primary goals for IT governance? So, primary goal is to provide an assurance that the investments in IT generate business value. If you look at the keyword, we are talking about business value. So, in the government also, when money is being spent, you need to ensure that the money is rightly deployed, effectively deployed, is able to bring not ROI, but ROI in terms of what is supposed to be accomplished. It also should take care of mitigation of risks that are linked with IT. And this is done. How can it be done? This is by implementing an organizational structure with well-defined roles for the responsibility of information, business processes, applications, and the infrastructure. Quite often, if you look at government organizations, one of the primary problems why many of the projects fail is the lack of clear accountability. You can never pinpoint that this person is actually responsible. In any government organization, if things fail, you can actually point to another person, that kind of person can point to another person. You always have finger pointing, and you can never know who is the person who is fundamentally responsible. Now, when you are implementing IT governance framework, now there is document called the RACI chart, which actually defines clearly for every key process or every critical process which is performed in the particular organization, who is supposed to be responsible, who is supposed to be accountable, who is to be consulted, who is to be informed. This ensures that you have the right definition of the roles and responsibilities, and you have the right organizational structure as required. And you are also able to identify what are the key tasks and activities need to be performed. You are also able to define what are the key goals and metrics templates for every process. If you want to implement e-governance or IT governance within the organization, it's not necessary that you use COBIT as the only framework. One of the beauty of COBIT is that COBIT is actually a research based on more than 43 international standards. So when you are using COBIT, you're not only using one standard, you're actually using the distilled information from more than 43 internationally governed standards. And when using any standard, this I think is a fundamental factor you need to remember, that every standard or framework is meant for a particular purpose, is meant for a particular audience, is meant for a particular objective, has a particular principle, has a particular philosophy. It's important that you get an overview of this particular concept of purpose or principle or philosophy of this particular standard, then you will find you can actually fit it and use it much better. So if you look at COBIT and look at, let's say, you want to look at integrate with enterprise risk management, you have COSO, which is supposed to be the model for enterprise risk management. You find COSO at the macro level, under which you can have COBIT. Now you want to implement, let's say, ISMS, Information Security Management System. You want to implement this ISO 17099 or 27001, which is now. You'll find the focus of 27001 is on security. So you can actually implement COBIT at a macro level, under which you can use ISO or 27001. You can also use ITL or you can use ISO 9000. This just gives you an idea that each standard or framework has a particular breadth in terms of the extent of coverage. It also has a particular depth in terms of how far it will go. Quite often one of the major problems which is faced by people who recognize that, okay, this standard is too generic and not usable, is the fact that don't distinguish this difference, that every framework or standard has a particular breadth, has got a particular depth. So you need to understand that then only you can effectively use it, you can actually effectively integrate with any of the process which you're performing. I've done some training programs for Infosys and for even companies like Satyam. When we implemented this training, we did this training, and during the course of the training we conducted some case studies. One of the questions which I always had in mind was, now if you look at these organizations, they have the best process in place. What is the additional value they get from COBIT? So during the course of the case study, they were able to actually discover that most of what is said in COBIT is actually being implemented by them. But they're also able to discover there are processes or gaps in the processes which they're performing. And when I asked them the case study discussion, the presentation, as to what do you think is the difference? We already implemented, let's say, any standard which is supposed to be there. What did you find by looking at COBIT in terms of specific case studies, in terms of implementation, let's say, at IT project management, or let's say we look at quality, or we look at business continuity or security? They said the key difference was that the perspective with which this information is placed. Recently, I did a 5-day training program on 27001, where I actually walked through the whole, the controls, the control objectives, and I actually read COBIT earlier. Now you find a lot of information which is available in ISO 27001 is available in even COBIT also. But the key difference was the perspective with which this information is presented, the generality and the layer in which this information is presented. And that's what these guys also said, that COBIT presents information from an IT governance perspective which you did not find in any of the standards which have been implemented. The second thing they said was, COBIT has some additional information we did not find in any other standards. For example, let's say you have these goals and metrics. For example, business continuity. Now, business continuity, they said that we are able to assess based on COBIT. We never knew that you can actually assess the maturity level for a process like business continuity. So we never knew that you can actually assess the maturity level, although we implement CMM. We did not think that this level of maturity level assessment could be done for processes like system security. So by using COBIT, we said we are able to use this, do this quite well. And we found that it's not necessary that we need to get the highest level of 4 or 5, but we can get any level determined based on the business needs. So the important factor is when you look at e-governance projects, to decide what is the level of implementation standard and to what extent do we want to integrate and use it. Now let's look at the relationship between IT governance and COBIT based on the CTG. They say COBIT contributes to the needs of the governance by what are the specific reasons, in what way it can make an impact. Making a measurable link between the business goals and the IT goals. Second, we can organizing IT activities into the generally accepted process model. We can actually ensure that it's structured in a particular way of a process, so that you can actually ensure there are inputs, there are processes performed, and there is an output, and you can measure that outputs and get into the PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act. You can identify what are the major IT resources to be leveraged. You identify what are the control objectives which are required, what do we want to accomplish by implementing control in a particular area, and define or provide tools for the management in terms of how do I measure whether what I wanted to accomplish is actually being accomplished. So it means you have goals and metrics or dashboards to tell you where are you on the way, are you on track, are you off track, and how well are you performing as far as the particular project is concerned. So you have maturity model which can give you a quick assessment of what is the current process capability, what is the level of capability which you require, and you also have the RSCA chart which we talked about earlier, which helps you in establishing responsibility, accountability, and you also know who's to be consulted and who's to be informed for each of the key activities for the particular project. And this is how COBIT can actually help in any e-governance projects. Now if you look at the COBIT focus areas which earlier talked about, one of the most important factors is strategic alignment. Stephen Hooby has rightly said, you may be quite busy climbing the wall, climbing the ladder, but it's important that you determine whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Quite often, if you look at e-governance projects, it's important to determine what is the purpose, what is the mission you're supposed to accomplish. And that will help you to see that you're focused on what you want to accomplish. The primary purpose of strategic alignment is to ensure that whatever IT is doing is towards accomplishing the business objectives. The second focus area is value delivery, is to ensure that you take up projects which actually bring in tangible results, measurable results in terms of what the government or the business wanted to accomplish. This is what we look at in terms of, this is also called as benefit realization. And the third, which is always important in any organization, whether government or non-government, is resource management. Are you managing the resources? Because resources is money. Then you have, in IT deployment, as in any other deployment, you have a plethora of risks which arise on account of specific deployment of information technology. Earlier we had people, let's say in a manual environment, where if a particular system, a manual system fails, you have other compensating measures which can take place. But quite often you find that in the case of IT, if that particular IT fails, then you cannot really accomplish any purpose. Recently in Bangalore, I think Lalu Prasad had come and he made some statements and which was misinterpreted by the audience, and they said some group of people went and damaged the railway reservation counters, some of the computers. Now because of the damage of the computers, they felt the whole reservation could not be done, accomplished in that particular purpose, in that particular scenario. In a manual environment, it would not have been possible. Maybe they would have come back within 1 hour or 2 hours. But in this case, it took them 2 to 3 days to actually come back. And that's what happened in the case of IT. There are new types of risks which need to be envisaged and managed. You also have system of performance management, which is very critical in any organization, whether government or non-government. Are we measuring what we're supposed to be accomplishing and how well are we performing that particular process and what we're supposed to be accomplishing. Now, this is a famous COBIT framework. Now, earlier something has also brought in this, but I just wanted to quickly look at this and then say, if you want to use COBIT as a model of IT governance and use it for e-governance framework, the simplest thing is to do is to actually walk through each of the process and pick up what is relevant for you. For example, let's say PO1 talks about defined strategic IT plan. Now, is strategic IT plan important for an e-governance project? If you say yes, you pick up the particular process. Similarly, define the information architecture. Is it important for a project? Now, information architecture talks about, have you defined what is the information requirements of the organization, who's supposed to have access to the information, who's supposed to process that information, where the information is supposed to be stored. So in any government project, do you think this is important? This is definitely important. You can look at that. Similarly, determine the technological direction, which talks about how do you harness the current and emerging technology to achieve business objectives. Yes, this could be required probably in the initial stage of the governance project. Now, define the IT process organization relationship in terms of for managing an e-governance project. Do we need to redefine how processes are being performed? Who's supposed to be responsible? Who's supposed to be accountable? Who's supposed to be informed? Yes, there is a need. Definitely, we can pick up this information. PO5, manage the IT investment. Do we ensure that whatever IT investment is being made is being managed? Now, that process is also important. Now, do we need to communicate management aims and direction in terms of what do we want to accomplish by implementing this e-governance project? Yes, you find that this is important. Like that, if you walk through, you find that most of the projects, most of the e-governance projects, you will find, let's say, out of 34 IT processes, there will be 18 or 20 processes which are important. The next step would be to actually look at the detailed control objectives which are given the management guidelines which are given, then walk through and see, okay, is there something which is relevant for me, for the e-governance project which I can actually pick up? COBIT, as I said, is a collection of best practices or good practices. Now they don't want to call best practices because some people said, okay, it may be best for somebody, why it should be best for me? So they say it's a collection of good practices which is supposed to be the consensus of experts. Now, if you want to use COBIT, that's what we always say, the best thing would be to look at what COBIT says and ask two fundamental questions. Does it apply to me? If it doesn't apply to you, don't need to worry, take it further. Second thing is to look at what is the value from it. Is it applicable to me? Next thing is what is the value of implementing? Is it relevant? What way will cause the difference to me in whatever we are doing? So if you find it can be impacting you in any way, by actually bringing additional process which could be useful, by actually helping you further, then you need to actually pick up the particular process. And the third stage would be to actually customize, which is talked about adopt and adopt as required. So if you follow this particular strategy, whether it's for e-governance projects, for any project for that matter, I think this is a basic principle. Look at what is given in COBIT, look at what it says, and then say, is it applicable to me? Second thing, in what way is it relevant to me, in what way is it valuable to me? Then accordingly customize and apply it as required. Now, just to give you a broad overview, so you can actually look at the process, pick up the process which are relevant, look at the domains which are important for you. The third, which is most critical, is, okay, what are the goals which you want to accomplish? So you have the process goals and the activity goals broadly, then you have the key practices. If I want to accomplish that goal, what are the key practices which I need to have? And what are the key metrics, what are the key areas where I need to have a system of performance measurement? And you also need to be sure about what are the IT resources I'm going to have and in what way it's going to impact in terms of the IT governance. Is it going to impact strategic alignment or value delivery? What is most critical for you? This is the overall framework of IT governance. Let's look at usage of COBIT for e-governance. Now broadly, if you look at the IT goals, the IT structure, architecture, they say every enterprise, that is the organization, uses IT to enable business initiatives which can be represented as business goals for IT. So it means you look at how do I use information technology to achieve business goals. So it means at the macro level, you have the enterprise strategy, which actually determines how the business goals, you're going to define the business goals for IT. And this is very critical when you want to accomplish strategic alignment, to ensure strategic alignment. Based on the business goals for IT, then you define the IT goals, and based on this you define what should be the enterprise architecture, what type of information technology deployment you're going to have. Then based on this, you're going to have a system of measuring the effectiveness of the performance, which is what is called as the IT scorecard. Now, you have the business goals for IT, which is given in COBIT, in terms of the process-oriented, domain-oriented architecture, which talks about whether business requirements or governance requirements, what is primarily provided by information technology is information. And this providing of information has a particular cost, has a particular risk, and you need to manage this. The use of information, require information for a particular purpose. You need to provide this information as required by them. And then you have the IT process which delivers this information, which is by running the applications and by using the infrastructure to people. Now, if you look at the relationship between business goals and the e-government goals, one of the important things which happens is COBIT links the business goals to the IT goals, which is very, very important, which can be useful in the e-governance project also. The business goals in the context of e-government are defined through the public value management, as highlighted in the CPG framework. And there's another framework called the CISAC Council's value management methodology. There is a methodology for actually implementing e-governance projects. It also helps you in measuring public value to delivering direct benefit to citizens. How to measure what is the tangible impact of benefit to the citizens, and how to enhance the value of government itself as a public asset. You also have a system of developing value hierarchy in terms of what is the direct customer value, what is the operational, strategic, or financial difference which you are able to make by implementing this particular project. Now, if you look at COBIT, the business goals, you have the business goals, which is the governance drivers, based on which you have the business outcomes, based on which you can determine what is to be accomplished. Similarly, if you look at business goals vis-a-vis e-government goals, you find you can use the public value framework, and you can use the CIO council for actually ensuring that the direct customer value, what is the social responsibility or social impact or social benefit, what is the benefit in terms of the operational impact, the strategic and the financial impact. Now let's look at a practical scenario. We all talked about theory. This looks quite philosophical. Is it being used? Now I did some survey and I found that Wipro is one of the organizations which has been using various types of frameworks for providing e-governance consulting services. You find they provide different types of advisory and implementation services, and they're providing services to more than 20 states in India. Now they have a specific type of service called as e-governance services, which actually provide specific services pertaining to e-governance strategy and roadmap, capacity planning, process engineering, program management, or e-tendering solution. Now if you look at the specifics, what are the advisory services they provide? You find they actually help you in defining e-governance vision, mission, strategies. This is most important. You need to be very clear about what you want to accomplish, what is the strategy, how do you want to accomplish it. You also develop a blueprint in terms of how do you go from the concept to the execution, prioritization of the initiatives, develop the e-governance architecture in terms of how the information is supposed to be provided at a macro level, develop the HR, the human resource roadmap for implementing e-governance roadmap. And they also give a list of the projects that have been implemented. Now if you go further, you find one of the most important factors in implementing e-governance projects is ensuring that you have the right capacity. And if you look at building capacity, the most important factor in building capacity, in sustaining and maintaining this, is develop and implement framework, policies and standards and guidelines. This is where framework like IT governance and COBIT could be useful. If you go further, they also say another important factor for ensuring the success of e-governance project is you have the people with the right skill sets. Now, if you look at people with the right skill set, it's important that you have people with the e-governance experience, process realignment, etc. So you also have people who have got the information about the technology, and this could be available or it could be actually provided additionally. Now, the next slide is what is most important. They say if you want to ensure the success of any e-governance projects, it's important that you have the right processes and tools. And if you look at technology, in terms of framework, we have different frameworks which could be used. You have the COBIT framework, they actually use COBIT actually for implementing the or improving the processes. Now look at some case studies. This is available on ISACA's website. You find that the organization, COBIT IT Governance, Ontario Pension Board, it tells you how they use COBIT, why do they use COBIT, and how did they leverage COBIT. Now they say there's a stronger focus on key areas such as risk management. By implementing COBIT, they have been able to do that. Gain greater understanding of thorough IT services function and supporting controls. Now if you look at this particular organization, the region of Peel, they talk about provide executive management with an assessment of the IT maturity level, how well are you performing that particular process, identify areas that require improvement or attention, develop the IT work plan. Now further, if you look at another organization, Bahrain Civil Services Board, they say COBIT strengthen the Bahrain CSP's IT infrastructure in terms of what IT is to be deployed. It is now a baseline for all the IT processes, and the risks are reduced. Similarly, if you look at another organization, Argentina, so these are only some examples of how COBIT has been effectively used. Now some of the references, if you want to do further research, I think I have used references from where you can actually pick up this information. This presentation will be made available, so you can actually take it further. So thank you. To summarize, when you want to implement COBIT for IT governance, it's important to remember that every framework or standard has a particular purpose, has a particular principle or a particular philosophy. And what happens when you use this best practice or good practice of framework, it gives you a readily available knowledge, it gives you a methodology, it gives you an approach which you can actually use and integrate as required. And to make the distinction, I thought to drive home the point, I'll show you one or two small videos. Quite often, if you look at, we talked about, yes, I think it will take only 2 minutes, we'll finish it. Okay, the expectations from IT. So how beautiful it would have been. Quite often there's an expectation gap in terms of what IT is supposed to accomplish, to being result oriented, that we need to accomplish what are required. important is the result orientation. You need to accomplish the objectives regardless of what is required. Now this I think the final one, which I think drives home a message, I would just look at why do we need to use best practices framework and when do we need to use them. I think this will drive home the message that if you are contemplating using COBIT or any other framework, what is the best time to begin? Okay? This guy is working in the aquarium, enjoying himself. Okay, I hope you got the message. Thank you very much.
Imagine having SLAs for G2C and C2G projects. And secondly, getting caught at the airport for non-paying access. I worry about the integrity of data. Anyway, excellent presentations. We move forward to do the honors and present the memento. May I request Sundar Krishnan, President Mumbai Chapter, please go present the memento.
I hope I have been actually able to move it forward and give you some insights. Swami Chinmananda has rightly said, if you are driving in a highway and you have got a car, the car may have backlight, you have the headlights. You may have to drive thousands of miles. You can't take